Okay, so for this lab, we had groups measure the mass of their seashells. And then we are simulating different ocean conditions. So this one is labeled control group because this seashell is just placed in 100 milliliters of salt water to simulate just a regular ocean environment. Then we had another group. This one's labeled 25% acidic because we used 75 milliliters of salt water, but then added 25 milliliters of vinegar to represent acid that's forming in our oceans. And then we have our 50% acidic, where there are 50 milliliters of salt water added and 50 milliliters of vinegar added. So this way, we can simulate different acidic conditions that are occurring in our ocean and then observed how that affects our seashells. So we took the mass before, and then today we're taking the mass after.
Okay, so there I was explaining the lab that we did. So like I said, the control beaker had 0 acid added to it. It was just plain salt water. Okay, and so this group, they took the mass of that seashell before on Friday, and it was 9.7 grams. Today, after the shell was in the salt water for 3 days over our weekend, it was 9.8 grams. So it actually seemed to gain some mass. So it gained about 1%. Let's drop our decimals to make this a little easier. It gained 1% of its mass. So it might have absorbed some water or had some salt added to it over this time, but it went up in mass in just the plain salt water. Now for the 25% acidic, the seashell started off about 10 grams. Today it measured 9.4 grams. So it actually lost about 7% of its mass sitting in an acidic environment for 3 days over the weekend. Then the next one sat in, half of it was vinegar, so it was a more acidic environment. It started off about 15 grams. Today we measured the seashell. It was 13.6 grams, and it lost about 12% of its mass. So you can see that as the amount of acid increased, the shells were losing more of its mass. And when we are talking about losing its mass, some of them were actually forming little tiny holes in the shell, or little pieces were breaking off. And so we could see how the acid was affecting the seashells. So in this beaker, or in this assignment, the beaker that was the control was just the plain salt water. It was plain salt water with no acid added. Okay, and so our vinegar in this lab is representing our acid. So it should be representing carbonic acid. Okay, now I'm going to talk about a few things that will help you answer the last 3 questions on your own. So I want to remind you that what we're talking about with acidification here, ocean acidification, is talking about our oceans becoming more acidic. So anytime we do things like burn fossil fuels,